Welcome to Zen Money Monday, weekly conversations with innovators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurial junkies about building good businesses, exploring what the idea of Zen money really means, and how to achieve it. With your host, author, business strategist, and Zen Money CFO, Liz LaJoy.
Welcome to Zen Money Monday. I'm so excited today to be talking with Nikki McKnight. Nikki and I connected a couple of years ago, maybe now.
Yeah, I think about 2.
Through that, you probably remember, your mind is like a steel trap. Through the Archangel community, where she was really the behind the scenes, get everything done from an operations standpoint for them. And recently she's gone out on her own. So I wanted to bring her on today to talk about what she sees from an operational standpoint as being the most important numbers, and we can geek out around that internal business management stuff, which is what this show is all about. But first and foremost, Nikki, do you want to share a little bit about how you got to where you are? I think we both have a background actually in civil engineering. Like you used to work in the building roads and bridges worlds, and now we're
not engineering, but I do have a lot of experience in supply chain.
Yeah.
I will say, I think one of the glorious things is just a very long and varied work history. Over the past 15 years, the theme has kind of remained the same of this behind the scenes operations, logistics, but I've really done everything from working for the largest third-party logistics company in the world. I'm a multi-billion-dollar corporation right out of university. I've worked in food service, managing student cafeterias and McDonald's, and I was a bar back at an Irish pub. But then I've also worked as a personal trainer for a while, and helped an online fitness company as their kind of online business manager and ops person. And then most recently working for Archangel. So it's been a bit of a pastiche of a resume, I will say. But through it all, it's just been the focus is how do we do things? How do we do things better? And how do we drive performance, profitability, and fun and culture through, I'll call them ordinary business systems.
I think it's such an important topic and so timely right now. We're seeing in the world around us some versions of, we'll go to supply chain management as an example, where things are working really well in the way they're supposed to, and things that are not working well at all, resources aren't being taken advantage of, and things like that. And so I think this is a really good time, because we're seeing it all around us, to take a minute and think about our own businesses and how things are running, and if we're really as squeaky clean on the inside as we'd like to be. Because I think sometimes people don't see the connection between doing internal work around, is everything flowing well? Do people have communication lines? And this is all language that sounds very like big business, but in a granular level for the small online entrepreneur or small moms and pops, that just means, does your staff or your team know where to go if they have a question?
Exactly.
And things like that are really going to make or break our ability to still be in business in 3 years as we continue to go through what appears to be a downturn in the economy.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, things like supply chain and logistics and workflow can seem really like big business concepts, but at the end of the day, it's when you're in a time of crisis, does everybody know how to respond and respond quickly? Because no matter what organization or industry that you're in, speed of response and speed of service, I think, is so important. Like coming from supply chain, hours were so important to make a difference between losing $1 million or, making $500,000. So speed of response, and it only really works if you have those systems to kind of support it. But also, if it's not a global pandemic, it's more so like, what if you as a CEO need to take some time off? Maybe you just want a vacation, or there's been a death in the family, or God forbid, you've become extremely ill. Those systems and the workflows that you've built is what is going to keep your company running while you can't be there, front of the ship, driving it, saying, okay, we sally forth and we go on to do these things. But the rest of your team knows exactly how they operate within the system, but also how they contribute to the overall success of the company, and being super clear in where their value is and where their skill set is. So in times of crisis or change or emergency or difference, they automatically know how to kind of rally themselves, their time, their resources to just like go get shit done.
I really like that you brought that up, because I think it's so fun to think about how our business runs when things are going well. Right? We can sit down and we can brainstorm and we can get into the strategy mindset. And then the shit hits the fan And maybe even the crisis is just that we have too much work to do, you know, or there's the, how do I sell and then get work done? And then oh shit, I have to sell again. You know, that version happens to businesses at all levels. And I think it's really important to remember that the whole point of having things running smoothly within your business, one, is to allow us to have time to celebrate when things are going well, but also to have those resources in place and the sort of the sandbags available to bolster things up when the water starts rising on us.
Absolutely. I like to refer to them as like guardrails or a roadmap. You kind of need to have an idea of where you're going, but also have like the freedom to play, to explore. You know, I work with like a lot of, I'll say, visionary, creative, spiritual entrepreneurs who kind of are in that kind of attitude. It's like, you know, how am I feeling today? What am I channeling? How do I want to show up today? What am I receiving? Which is great for them. That's like the backbone that businesses are built on, is vision and ideas. But when you have a team or you have structure, that can be terrifying to them because they don't really know what's going to, you know, come at them next or how they're going to keep moving forward. And I think it's the worst feeling in the world for a team to be 6 months down the road and to look back and say, oh, we really haven't gone that far, but we've done so much, but we're not actually going anywhere. So putting in these guardrails that'll, you know, kind of guiding people along the road towards that ideal state and that vision that has been shared with the company. But at the same time, people kind of have that freedom to come up with new ideas, come up with new systems, contribute in different ways, then have some fun without veering too far from the course.
We could talk about this for hours because obviously a lot of our client base overlaps too, because we live with those we work with those types of entrepreneurs and small business owners too. And what I find, and I'm guessing you do too, is that that kind of very creative, quick start type, you know, in tune person often is not only hesitant, but actively resistant about putting sort of more official business strategies in place. They often feel like, I fly by the seat of my pants and that's what works. However, I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, many people of that ilk can create huge businesses, and then everyone who works under them is frustrated, never really has a clear direction, feels like they're like turret gunning all the time. I don't know where it's coming from, that every single time there's, you know, every single day there's something new and a new initiative. And we really, I think, need to at least be open to the conversation around, all right, I am my business, but if I really want to grow to 7 figures and beyond, then I need to be able to recognize what my strengths are and make sure you can build out these other structures or let other people build out these other structures so that you have a team who loves what they're doing and you're not having to churn through staff all the time and you're not having to wonder like, why am I working so hard still?
Exactly. You know, without the systems and without getting out of your own way, you kind of lose the ability to leverage your own time and leverage your own resources. There's a reason people like us exist, and it's to serve those people, but also kind of push back on them when, you know, you can't see the forest for the trees, you can't see your own patterns, whatever metaphor you want to throw into it. You can't really see where you need to go without having kind of these structures in place. And they don't have to be restrictive. One of, I think, my favorite things I've ever seen within an organization was to say, we're putting in these guardrails, we're putting in this roadmap. It will give you freedom, but also within this roadmap, here's all of the freedom that you have. For example, I have a client right now who was, when we were working through this system of kind of coming up with the strategies and the workflows for delivering her services to her clients, she kind of got a little like, oh, like this seems boring and not so much fun. I was like, no, like look within this. When it comes to how you show up on social media, you can do whatever you want. You could show up 10 times a day. You could do lives every 10 minutes if that's how you want to show up, because that is a part of the universe that you have complete control over. However, you cannot go launch 10 courses without going through this quick checklist. You cannot, you know, promise XYZ without talking to the team, and here's why. And even if you think about systems as being a set of intelligent filters or decision-making trees, it still kind of allows, you know, that visionary, that creative person to come up with the dozens of ideas that they seem to always have, at the same time protecting their team from them. Really, they're kind of like Godzilla sometimes when they come into the office and it's just like, boom, I've thought of these things, and the team is like, shit, I'm already really busy, how am I going to fit this in?
Am I supposed to drop the other thing?
Exactly.
or do we move on to this new thing? I need a little bit more parameter around this. So if you are one of those visionary people, I think both Nikki and I would like to just encourage you to challenge yourself a little bit around looking at this more structured side of things what it could do for your business, because it really is the difference between, bumping along at, a couple of six figures and actually creating something of value that's going to live on beyond you, or if not beyond you, at least to be able to, sustain a team regularly and grow to those dollars that you want. I also think from a financial standpoint, one thing that happens is, as we grow, we can spend a lot of money continuing to grow. And so you can have, I posted this question a while ago on social media around like, would you like to have a 6-figure business and take home $200,000 a year? Or would you like to have a 7-figure business and take home $200,000 a year? Because we assume that we're making more money. And therefore, as the owner and founder, we're going to triple our income. If we're not careful about how we grow, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And I get a little, I don't want to say militant because that sounds a little bit too aggressive. I'm doing this for your own good. For me, financials and kind of knowing what your numbers are and, where you're ending up, if you don't know those, to me, those are the things that are going to sink the company the quickest. And I think it can be overwhelming. Like I happen to like bookkeeping. I find it quite relaxing. I do my own books. I do them for a few of my friends who are also business owners. So it's all about, working with the CEO and working with the team and the leadership team to say, what are the 3 things we have to look at? And you only ever have to look at those on a day-to-day basis to determine the health and temperature of your company, to know if you need to reallocate resources or things so you're not so reactive, but also you're not doing things blindly with like an ostrich and their head in the sand and just have no idea of what's going on. But it's really, I think, about getting to the core of what are those 1, 2, 3 metrics or numbers that can tell me on a day-to-day basis, how we doing? We doing okay? Fantastic. And then I'll meet with my accountant at the end of the month to get into the nitty gritty. But other than that, I don't want to stress about it. And really, you shouldn't have to.
Yeah, I really like that approach. And the reality is those 3 metrics can be different per business. I'm curious from your perspective, like what are your 3 metrics that you love? Because there is this operational version of metrics, which is like numbers and are we getting return on investment and those kinds of things. And then there's the financial stuff. And a lot of times they overlap.
Yeah. So for me personally, I look at like gross revenue, cash collected, like what is coming in the door. I look at number of clients on retainer or who are in some of my recurring services, just because I know how much those cost and I can plan my cash flow accordingly, knowing that if I have 4, this is how much money I have coming in. And around that, I can make some decisions. And if I'm getting to the end of the month and I only have 3 and I know I need 4, then I know immediately I need to go out and do a little bit of attacking. And then I've just readjusted mine. I have some around like audience growth, because lead gen is a play for me for the next quarter. So it's looking at mailing list size, what is the growth rate I'm trying to hit there. But I have other clients who I try to get everybody to look at gross revenue, cash collected, I think, because that's kind of the most important, as well as I do. You can't really look at P&L or net things because you won't get that until 2 weeks into the next month. And by then you've lost all this time to fix or adjust or kind of course correct. But I also have some people who one of their metrics is how many proposals have I sent out? Not how many sales calls have they had, but how many proposals did I send? Because they know their closing rate. They know it's really good. So all they're focused on is how many proposals do I get out the door? And that's more meaningful to them than to say I had 60 sales calls, because it doesn't matter. All they need is 8 proposals. So I think it's, find the financial metric, 1 or 2 that make the most sense to you, but also when it comes to the transformation of the service you're providing, what is the best metric? I have another client who is one of her key metrics is number of client enrollments on an ongoing basis. Like her goal is to serve 120 people or to have 120 enrollments. So that's the only number she looks at, because she'll set a goal for the month and she knows that if she hasn't hit it, and we're almost, it's May 1st tomorrow when we're recording this, that she's like, all right, we really need to step it up in May, and here are the measures we're going to take. She doesn't need to know her profit and loss. She doesn't need to know her margins. She doesn't need to know any of this. She just needs to know cash collected, how many enrollments, and is my list growing so I can attract new people. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's from a day-to-day standpoint, that's absolutely a great way of looking at it, because I do think that when you get into the numbers conversation, it does start to feel overwhelming, and many people kind of just put up the blind shutters and go, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to hustle. The problem with that is it's not sustainable long term. And it's very hard to build a team if you're in hustle mode, because then your team sees that and organically it's just a really uncomfortable place, and you have a lot of attrition and all kinds of other things that aren't going to really grow your business forward. I would put a caveat in the, let's find a metric and stick with it, because I do think it's our responsibility as business owners to also get to that point where we can read our P&L, we can understand the ins and outs, because there is a lot of spending decision that happens that doesn't necessarily align with the I'm just going to worry about sales metrics part of it. I will throw that out there. But in general, I think the good idea is to look at your business and think about which version of number is really meaningful. Because I'll take Facebook ads as an example. I think lots of people get like, you do the research or you work with an expert and they're like, this is the number to track. Click-throughs may or may not be the number that's meaningful for you. It might be for somebody else, in the same way that you can build your business a million different ways. Let's just find the thing that tells you whether you're doing well financially or not.
Exactly. And I think, again, industry dependent, there can be millions of them. I'm working with a few tech startups right now doing SaaS, like software as a service. And I'm learning tech as I work with these people. And there are millions of metrics, daily active usage and percentage and all of these things. But at the end of the day, it becomes noise because people get concerned with tracking a million different things. And I was like, yes, do people need to know these numbers? Do you need to understand how they impact your bottom line? How do they affect your team's bandwidth? How they, affect the success that your users and your clients are having? Absolutely. But if you look at those every single day, you are going to drown and you will have such like paralysis by analysis that you won't actually do anything. So when you look at the larger scheme numbers and those more detailed, finessed numbers, working in a way that is an appropriate time and place to look at those, I think is so super important. Like, is it only that department needs to look at it and then they need to provide a report to the CEO to say this is the health of our division? Or do you say like, no, these are ones we want to look at every single day, or we only want to look at them when we launch a new project or a new initiative, whatever that is? I think it's put some filters in around numbers, because otherwise you're going to just panic.
Oh yeah. I think, and it shows up in different ways, right? For the sort of intuitive entrepreneur, it shows up in the, I'm not going to look at it at all and just fly by the seat of my pants, more or less. Or expect somebody else to just tell me if things are going off the rails. And then maybe this person doesn't tell you when things go bad. And then you have the other version, which is the very data-driven type of personality, left brain analytical thinkers who, get very data overwhelmed. And it feels good, right? It feels like busy, but it's really just busy work. It feels good being like, I know. We had 125,000 whatevers. Well, it's not really driving you forward one way or another.
Exactly.
That's awesome. What do you feel has been, since you've moved into your own business, because it's only been a few months since you've actually moved into helping a variety of businesses, what's your favorite part of the whole, this is my show and I'm not just in somebody's team now?
Oh, I think it really comes down to kind of showing up as more of your own self. We were talking earlier that when you work for a company or you work for a brand, you work for another individual, you're representing them no matter where you go. So it's been interesting to kind of get some separation from that and working for other people and being able to be, not critical of them, but you can be critical of the practices, or you can offer a different insight. I think I, got locked into this idea that I was always a behind the scenes person and really couldn't be anything but that, because that's been the last 10, 12 years of my career. And then you kind of start realizing like, no, like I was an actor before I did any of this. I was a writer. I was a poet. Like I was a creative person, I swear. And I've lost that. So it's been really fun for me to kind of, step up into that kind of, quote unquote spotlight. And I'm doing a lot of video content right now and just providing frameworks and sharing what I know and trying to filter things through how can you execute and implement this yourself today and not 6 months from now, or leave it in a notebook, never to be seen again. And maybe when you move, you find it again. But I think that's been the most exciting part, is just, learning what do I actually think about things and how do I actually want to show up, and then just doing it. It's been a bit of a growth experience. It's been kind of nerve-wracking. I'm finding out the things I thought I believed in, I actually don't. I just thought I should, which has also been an interesting process. But I think that's been the most fun. It's just kind of flexing that creative part of my brain instead of the part of my brain that loves spreadsheets and databases.
That reminds me of when I started out on my own too. Yeah, because you come from if you come from a sort of a more technical background, as we both do, you get into, you're kind of habituated to just kind of doing the thing as it was laid out, probably by somebody else. Yep. And so being able to, nobody's going to knock you on the shoulder and be like, stop doing it, or do this instead. And that's really liberating as well as terrifying.
Definitely both of those things at the same time, all the time.
given that you have worked with in the past very large businesses and are now working with sort of probably a range,
Mhm.
I'm curious where you feel the sweet spot is when people should start to think about, because I get this question a lot, especially around the finances too. And as you know, like the finances is the lens to look at all this other stuff.
Mhm.
People are always wondering, when do I really need to start caring about this stuff? When do I really need to put systems in place and think about those guardrails?
Day one. And they don't have to be, anything super expansive. Like, I'm not to say when I was day one, I was like, I'm going to have 10 automations already in place. I'm going to have all of these automatic forms that are going to feed me. But it's more like I had those guardrails from day one to at least give me some direction. Because again, if you don't have a team or, a company around you, it can also be very easy for yourself to get off track, even though you teach this, you live this. I think it's very much the cobbler's kid has no shoes. Some days you're like, I teach systems and I don't have any. They don't
Yeah.
have to be sophisticated. They can just be a checklist. They can just be a system because, maybe, 6 to 8 months down the road, I'll have a business where I can't do it by myself anymore and I want to bring on help. But if I don't have a system to plug somebody into, how long is it going to take for me to get that person up to speed? And how much of my time and energy is that going to take away from the things I could be doing? So I like to be from day one. If I had to hire someone tomorrow, how prepared would they be? And I don't have anything fancy. I've worked for multi-billion-dollar corporations. I ran a $20 million company in my early 20s, and I've worked with multi-million-dollar companies several times. And a lot of them, surprising to me, don't have systems. So when I started, it was a challenge for the first 6 to 8 months to try to put them into some semblance of order, because I think business owners know when they need help, but when help shows up, they have no idea what to do with it because there's
Mhm.
nothing to really plug them into or slot them into or even give them as like an overview. This is what I need you to do. You don't have that. And I think that's another reason why entrepreneurs and business owners typically struggle to hire their first employee, whether it's an admin or a VA, is because they don't have anything to say here. And they think hiring someone is going to take so much time. I don't have the time to hire and train someone.
Oh
Well, if
man, I hear
maybe
it all the
thought about
time.
it.
It's that
Yeah.
whole, sorry to talk over. Yes.
No.
No, I hear it all the time too. It's the
Mhm.
chicken or the egg thing,
Exactly.
around I don't want it. I can't lose a week to train somebody, but you also can't afford to not take that time
Mhm.
to train somebody. And, I
Mhm.
think the hiring process in and of itself is a
Mhm.
whole can of worms for so many people, particularly in the online space where we can present ourselves very fancy and very knowledgeable. And then the reality of working with someone more times than, well, maybe I only hear the bad stories, but more times than not, I feel is less than ideal. People aren't getting what they're paying for. Do you have any suggestions around vetting?
In terms of the hiring process?
Yeah.
Oh, I will say that is one thing I got really good at over the last few years is hiring, or at least putting people through a process. And I will say more often than not, we won with who we hired. We did obviously have a few that didn't work out. Um, but again, the first step for me in any hiring process is really getting clear on what you need, but not so much what tasks do you need. What are the outcomes that you want? Most of how I work, whether it's, strategic planning or personnel or projects, is what is the outcome? What does success for this role mean? What am I looking to get out of this? What is the transformation I want within myself? It shouldn't come from a place of, I don't want to answer my emails. I don't want to, I need someone to organize my calendar, because those are tasks and that's fine. But what is the outcome? I want to free up more of my own time. I want someone to tell me how to organize my day, whatever you need. If you think outcome first, it also helps you assess, like, is this a full-time role? Is this part-time? Is this contract? Is this outsourcing? Getting really clear on that, because I'm a firm believer in the hire slow, fire fast. Like, take that time really at the beginning to assess what you need, what you have the capacity to take on, either financially, what can you afford to pay someone, but also how much time do you need? And there's a bunch of techniques you can do to find out, how much of a person you need and how long you need them around for. But going through that exercise first is just so much easier, because as someone who has applied for many jobs and, has been on numerous job interviews, what scares me is when people don't actually know what they need, because to me that either means this is going to be so stressful, or I'm going to hate this and I will either lose my job because they don't know what they're doing, or I'm going to have to quit because I just don't see them being a leader or being a boss. And I know that's what I would need right off the bat. And then going from there, I think I did a rant on this on social media a few weeks ago where I hate when people post in Facebook groups like, hey, I'm looking for tips and tricks. And it just turns into like 20 posts of, hey, I do that, hire me. And it's like, it's not what we're looking for. How do you vet that? So I think it's really having a system and forcing people to go into your system of how you want to handle applications.
Yeah. And on top of that, I think we spend, especially in the beginning of a business, but even many years in, can get in the habit of spending all this time, on the external marketing conversation and making sure that vision and version of ourselves is pristine. And then the internal stuff in terms of a communication with a potential staff member, our teams, our bankers, or whoever we're working with is not as well thought out. And therefore we come across as not actually as strong as we could be. And it's not that that's confrontational or has to be, but if I'm hiring somebody, I want them to see that they're coming into a place that is thoughtful, is telling them right out of the gate what to expect for being here. And sometimes we lose sight of that in the flurry of trying to do stuff.
Yeah. Like you kind of just get so panicked about the idea of like, I need someone now. I don't really care who it is, or I don't have time to go through a proper vetting process. And really, I think like a good hiring process, if you have a pool of candidates, which I think in the world right now, there are many people who are looking for work and there's tons of decent people, but you need to filter them in a way that is, very strategic and take people through the same process so that you have at the end of the day, like an even sample of what you're actually getting. And you're not just being super reactive into, oh, I just need somebody. I'll take you. You seem like a nice person. Well, they might be, but you also, maybe you cause bigger problems, or maybe you shoot yourself in the foot for 6 months as you try to either train this person and then get rid of them, or, work through some sort of process that at the end of the day, you're like, ugh, I wish I had just taken more time. I think at the end of the day, when you're thinking about hiring or even building a company that you'd be proud to invite somebody in, for me, the most important thing I've been thinking a lot of recently is you have to be the number one consumer of your own content. Like this difference between what you're showing to clients, what you're showing on social media, it has to be the same as what's in your back office, because otherwise it's just like this false front, which I think is just so disingenuous and like not congruent with you. And if you're, teaching these systems, and they should be systems that you use, but it also, when you bring somebody into that as a new employee or a team member, like how invigorating and exciting would that be to a new person to be like, oh, I get it. I see exactly how I contribute. I'm a true believer in this. And I'm so ready to just come in and just go. And we're going to kill it together. We're going to kill it as a team, as opposed to, oh, yeah, this is uncomfortable, but I guess it's a paycheck.
Yeah. I think if we don't walk the walk, behind the scenes, it causes all kinds of problems. And there's so many people who I think really start their businesses, especially in the online space, with the best intentions. But sometimes we can grow so quickly that there's this roller coaster happening, and, feeling like we're supposed to show up in this way. And maybe we're not super centered in ourselves in terms of the work that's being done, that it does create this morass on the back end. And there's just, I don't want anybody listening to fall into a trap, or if you are, to be able to think about how to get out of that trap, because that's where longevity comes from. If you have staff who love what they're doing, who are going to move you forward, and you can't be the only one dragging them behind you, because that's just exhausting, let's be honest. And it doesn't work. That's how you can get to that next level, and the level beyond, and the level beyond that. Absolutely. And that's where the creativity can really thrive if you have this space that you've created with the guardrails in place to allow you to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. We could talk about this forever, but
I know
you're a busy lady too. If we were going to leave our listeners today with one takeaway around ops management, what would it be?
Ooh,
so many.
I was like, welcome to my TED Talk. I hope you have 4 hours. I'll use kind of like a recent example as something to think about. I think business owners, when you say that you value your team and the safety of your team, it really does need to be the thing you care about. It can't be just lip service, because your team will know, and it's, it doesn't feel good. But I think when you think about how you approach your team with feedback or ideas, or you're just really frustrated and you want to get to the bottom of something, how you approach that, I think the idea of curiosity over judgment has to be so much at the forefront of your mind. So I was working with a client, and we kind of enacted this new communication strategy that's effective for his team so far, but he was feeling a little bit constrained by it because it's just not his way. And I think, again, visionary creative people will tend to feel this way early on in the system. It's like, I'm the things that bind me, these are annoying. So he wanted to get feedback from the team on how they felt about it, but he framed the feedback in such a way that he was pretty much telling them how to think. Like, wouldn't it be better if we did these in the afternoon? Because clearly, like, everybody is just so fried in the morning, and then we run around the circle. And, you know, luckily his team is made up of those who will speak their mind and said, no, it's better in the morning. But just how you frame questions to create this feeling of safety and curiosity as opposed to judgment, I think is just so important. And even if you have a new idea, don't come in saying, oh, I think this is a really good thing and this will do this. So when can we do it? Like, that automatically just like, oh, my throat constricted a little bit.
I got really nervous. I was like, I don't know. No.
Exactly. Like, the beauty of having a system and a team is they will tell you that, hey, that is a great idea. I have some questions. You know what? Based on the things you've already told us that you want to accomplish right now, do you want us to get rid of this priority and slot this in, or can this wait a month? Right? So for me, that's the biggest kind of thing I'm working on right now and trying to make business owners aware of, is how you frame things to your team to create safety. It's not about you, it's about them. And how can you go in there without judgment and instead with curiosity and not being married to an idea, and let your team tell you what they think first.
I love it. It goes back to that whole, are you a manager or a leader thing, which I think many creative entrepreneurs obviously want to identify with the leader side, but sometimes unintentionally the communication style comes down a little top down or top heavy.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. I appreciate that. All right. So final question, which everyone gets asked. I want to know what your definition of Zen money is in this space.
Ooh, I love this. Zen, like, the concept of Zen is something that's very close to my heart because my university degree is actually in Japanese and East Asian culture and history. So I got to read a lot of like the Zen writings and like the koan, like, you know, those Zen poems, like this, what is the sound of one hand clapping and all of those good things. So for me, Zen money is really, you just have an awareness of all of the things and how they flow together. I always imagine like those Zen rock gardens with the swirls, with the rakes. For me, that's what it is. I have visibility to everything, and I'm aligned with it, and it is calm, but I know how to move it. I know that I can pick up the rake and I can readjust the flow of it. I know that I can go sit somewhere else. But for me, it's all about, yes, the awareness, and I know that I am the master of it, but that I also exist within it. It is not me versus, it is me and, or me within, or me also.
Oh, I like it. Perfect.
Boom, mic drop. Thank you, TED Talk.
Done. Now we're done. Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have you back on and we'll geek out some more around operations management. Yay. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.